I want us to touch on very quickly about the issue of the ICC. There's a lot of light now being focused on Kenya because of the ICC involvement in indicting some six uh, members of parliament and ministers
Yes.
for the violence that occurred after the 2007 elections, uh, from that point of the election until the next year.
Yes.
What, what what is your take on that, and how can, first of all, how do you think this will affect the country, and then how does it also uh, affect Africa in general?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Kenya is a signatory to the Rome Statute. Following the elections of 2007 and the violence subsequently, the post-election violence and what happened, that was a dark moment in Kenya. Things happened that should not have happened. 1,500 people lost their lives. 500,000 Kenyans were displaced from their homes. Many, close to 20,000 people, are still in camps, in what we call internally displaced persons camps. So it was a dark moment in Kenya's history. The ICC, on several occasions, reached out to Kenya and expected Kenya to do the right thing in terms of addressing the causes of that. Following the violence, the government of Kenya itself set up a commission. It was referred to as the Waki Commission because it was chaired by a former judge, Justice Waki. A report was written that looked at the mandate of this particular commission was to look at the causes and the effects and the impact of the election violence. And they submitted a very substantive report. And that commission was not the only one that conducted the investigations and submitted a report. Several non-governmental organizations, several faith-based organizations, a UN organization that also conducted their own investigations and wrote a report. Well, the short of it is that we then, as a result of the law that was established, that created this commission, that conducted this work, had an opportunity to actually establish and put in place a tribunal to try the persons who were responsible for the post-election violence. And efforts were made. The government itself drew up a bill which was brought to Parliament for the Parliament to discuss and endorse, and that failed. Subsequently, a member of Parliament brought to Parliament a private member's bill. Again, tried to convince the Parliament that it was in the interest of the country, it was in the interest of fighting impunity, which has been a big problem for us in the country, that we set up this local tribunal, because the ICC had been presented as a last option, even within the report that was presented, because what the Waki Commission did was it said, this is what we recommend should happen. And one of the last options within the recommendations that were made by the Waki Commission was that if all else fails in this country and the local and the government fails to deal with and to bring to book persons responsible for the post-election violence, then we go the ICC option. So with two attempts to bring a bill into Parliament to enable us to set up a local tribunal, failing, then we were left with the last option, i.e. it kicks it. And that is exactly what happened. The Commission subsequently presented its report to Kofi Annan. And Kofi Annan, as you know, was the person who led the panel of eminent persons who helped us to negotiate the settlement that brought an end to the violence and that created the coalition government. And so the envelope was eventually handed to Kofi Annan, and at that point it sort of left the government. But even at that point, even with Kofi Annan having stepped in, Kofi Annan himself on several occasions came back to Kenya and appealed to the government to put in place a local mechanism to deal with the perpetrators of the post-election violence. And we still failed. And so here we are now in a situation where it's an almost no return situation. The prosecutor of the ICC has named 6 individuals, and in another 2 months or so, he will be presenting his case to the pre-trial chamber in the Hague.
But we are seeing movement now where Parliament wants to revert back to what they failed to do
Exactly.
several times.
Exactly.
What is motivating that? And does this send some wrong signal to the world community about their commitment to prosecuting or bringing to book this?
It definitely does. It definitely sends the wrong signals. Our commitment, and as a member of the international community, particularly in light of our new constitution, we have a section within the new constitution that actually outlines our commitment to international laws, international conventions, and our obligation and our obligations to the same. And the ICC and the Rome Statute is no exception. So I think the parliamentarians, and it was a very small group of parliamentarians, we have a parliament that has 230 members of parliament, and on the day when they were making this decision, there were, about 15 of them. So it wasn't by any means a full house, as it were. All the same, it was only a recommendation. Parliament can only make a recommendation. The position of the government is, and the 2 principals have indicated this, the President and the Prime Minister, even as recently as December, the beginning of December, when it was known that the prosecutor will actually be naming names by the middle of December, the President and the Prime Minister both gave their word and their commitment, and it is there in writing that the government position is that we shall work with the International Court and collaborate with them to see to it that the perpetrators of the post-election violence are brought to book and brought to justice.
And we continue with this interview with His Excellency Ambassador Elkanah Odembo, Ambassador from Kenya to the United States. We'll be right back.